My name is Myra Whitmore. I am 34 years old, a dedicated cardiology resident at a major metropolitan hospital, and the single mother of 3-year-old twins, Lily and Lucas. Exactly 2 months ago, I was lying on a cold, stainless steel gurney in an emergency room, bleeding internally after a catastrophic car accident. My hands were trembling violently from shock, pain, and blood loss as I dialed my parents' number from a dying phone. I didn't need their money, nor did I need a grand gesture of affection. I simply needed someone, anyone who shared my blood, to watch my toddler twins for just a few short hours while a team of trauma surgeons fought to save my life. What I received instead was a single text message in our family group chat that read, "Myra, you've always been an absolute nuisance and a burden to this family. We have Taylor Swift tickets with Vanessa tonight that we've planned for months. Figure it out yourself." So, lying in that hospital bed with an 4-line running into my arm, I did precisely that. I called an emergency private nanny service, authorized triple the standard rate without a second thought, and made a single, unbreakable decision that would permanently alter the course of my life. I cut them off completely. The automatic monthly mortgage payments, the premium health insurance coverage, the sudden car repairs, the roof replacements, every single financial burden I had been quietly carrying for my parents for the past 8 years vanished overnight. 2 weeks later, as I was slowly recovering in my kitchen, there came 3 sharp, authoritative knocks on my front door. To truly understand how a daughter can be transformed into a secret financial ATM, while simultaneously being treated as a social pariah, you have to look back at the environment I grew up in. Inside the Carver household, I learned at a very early age that parental love was not a natural, unconditional right. It came with a strict, cruel ranking system. My older sister, Vanessa, was the undisputed star of the family. She was 3 years older than me, effortlessly beautiful, and possessed a magnetic, theatrical quality that made my parents' eyes light up with unbridled joy whenever she walked into a room. When she dramatically announced at 17 that she intended to pursue a career in high-fashion design, my mother wept happy tears into a silk handkerchief, while my father proudly toasted her as our little family visionary. Conversely, when I nervously announced a few years later that I wanted to attend medical school and become a surgeon, my father merely offered a brief, dismissive nod and muttered, "Well, at least that's practical." Practical. That single word became the defining summary of my entire existence in their eyes. I buried my hurt deep inside and told myself it didn't matter. I threw myself obsessively into my academic studies, aced every single advanced placement exam, and clawed my way into one of the most prestigious medical programs in the country. 4 grueling years of undergraduate pre-med, 4 brutal years of medical school, and 3 relentless years of a high-stakes cardiology residency. The afternoon I graduated from medical school should have been celebrated as one of the absolute proudest milestones of my life. Instead, my parents arrived 2 full hours late for the commencement ceremony, missing my walk across the stage entirely. "Sorry, sweetheart," my mother murmured casually, her eyes darting past my face as she offered a brief, cold hug. Vanessa had an emergency last-minute meeting with a potential fashion investor downtown. We obviously had to drop her off first. There were no congratulations flowers, no family celebration dinner, and no genuine words of pride, just a single, rushed photo taken next to a dumpster in the hospital parking lot before they sped off, because Vanessa urgently required emotional support following her business meeting. Compare that deliberate neglect to Vanessa's very first amateur fashion show in New York City 3 years prior. My parents had happily financed a 5-star hotel suite, purchased front-row seats for the entire extended family, and flown across the country without a second thought. My father posted 17 separate high-resolution photos on Facebook with glowing captions like, "So profoundly proud of our amazingly talented girl pushing boundaries in NYC." I received a blurry parking lot photo and a lukewarm "Congrats, honey." I spent years making excuses for them in my own mind, gaslighting myself into believing that their behavior made logical sense. I told myself that the fashion industry was cutthroat and competitive, meaning Vanessa naturally required extra emotional and financial nurturing. Medicine, on the other hand, was stable and structured. I was strong, resilient, and capable of handling life on my own. What I didn't realize back then was that my parents' toxic favoritism wasn't merely emotional, it was deeply, systematically financial, and I was the unsuspecting mark paying for their devotion. The financial exploitation began 8 years ago, immediately after I graduated from medical school and began earning my very first modest resident stipend. My father called me late one Tuesday evening, his voice tight with performative embarrassment and hesitation. "Myra, sweetheart, your mother and I are in a bit of a terrifying financial bind this month," he admitted softly. "The house mortgage payment is due in 48 hours, and things are exceptionally tight for us right now. Could you possibly help us out? Just this once, until my business picks back up. Just this once." I transferred $2,400 to his bank account that very night, without a single second of hesitation. They were my parents, they had raised me, and of course I would step up to help them in a crisis. But just this once instantly transformed into a mandatory, expected monthly obligation. The $2,400 mortgage payment became an automatic transfer on the first of every month. Then came their private health insurance premiums, an additional $800 on the 15th of every month, when my father's small consulting firm quietly dropped their group coverage. Then came the endless sequence of family emergencies, the transmission failure on my father's car, the emergency roof repair after a winter storm, the brand new high-efficiency furnace, the property tax shortfalls. I never said no. Not a single time. I worked extra 80-hour shifts at the hospital, picking up overnight moonlight duties just to ensure my own bank account wouldn't bounce while maintaining their comfortable lifestyle. When I unexpectedly became pregnant with my twins and their father panicked, walking out on me during my 5th month of pregnancy, I found myself utterly terrified, physically exhausted, and desperately alone. Following a terrifying episode of early bleeding that landed me in the triage ward, I called my parents from a hospital bed, weeping, begging them to drive down and spend the weekend with me just to hold my hand. "Oh, honey, we wish we could possibly come," my mother sighed over the receiver, her voice dripping with artificial sympathy. "But Vanessa is just so completely overwhelmed and stressed after her runway show in Milan. She really, truly needs us by her side in New York right now." They didn't come. They didn't show up for the terrifying, emergency birth of my twins. They didn't come during that brutal first month, when I was operating on 2 hours of broken sleep, nursing 2 premature infants alone in a dark apartment while frantically studying for my medical board exams. Yet, through all of that agonizing isolation, the automatic bank transfers kept quietly leaving my account, $2,400 on the 1st, $800 on the 15th, plus whatever extra cash my mother casually texted me for groceries and small bills. Out of a quiet, subconscious sense of self-preservation, I maintained a detailed private spreadsheet on my laptop. I didn't fully understand why I was tracking it at the time, perhaps some deeply buried, hurt part of my soul needed to see the objective cold truth documented in black and white. Over 8 years of my medical career, the grand total I had quietly funneled to Richard and Helen Carver amounted to $320,000. I never asked for a formal public thank you. I never expected a parade or a grand speech. But I also never, in my wildest, most terrifying nightmares, expected to be openly referred to as a nuisance and a burden by the very people whose comfortable existence I had single-handedly financed for nearly a decade. That horrifying reckoning finally arrived on a rainy Tuesday evening. I was driving home along the highway after completing a grueling 16-hour surgical shift in the pediatric cardiology unit. My eyes were heavy with bone-deep exhaustion, but I was fully alert, keeping my hands firm on the steering wheel. As I entered a major intersection on a green light, a heavy commercial pickup truck ran a red light doing 50 miles an hour, slamming broadside directly into my driver's side door. The world erupted into a terrifying symphony of exploding glass, twisting steel, and screaming metal before fading into total, suffocating darkness. When I woke up, the blinding interior lights of a speeding ambulance were flashing above my face, and severe, tearing pain was searing through my lower abdomen. A familiar face in blue scrubs was hovering over me, his hands applying firm pressure to my side. Myra. Myra, stay with me. Can you hear my voice? It was Dr. Marcus Smith, a senior emergency room attending physician at my hospital whom I had worked alongside on dozens of trauma cases over the past 2 years. Marcus. My voice came out as a weak, raspy thread. What happened to me? You were hit in a severe broadside collision, Myra, Marcus explained rapidly, his face pale with professional concern. We are 3 minutes away from the trauma bay. You have significant blunt force abdominal trauma and signs of active internal bleeding. We need to get you into emergency surgery immediately to stabilize you. Surgery. The word hit my conscious mind harder than the physical impact of the truck. My children. Marcus. I grabbed his scrub sleeve with frantic, trembling fingers. Lily and Lucas, they are at home with the neighborhood teenager. Her shift ends at 8 o'clock. She has to leave for her high school classes tomorrow. Marcus checked his watch quickly. It is 7:15 p.m. right now, Myra. You have 45 minutes. I had 45 minutes to find a responsible adult to care for my 3-year-old twins before being put under general anesthesia for life-saving surgery. With shaking, blood-stained fingers, I grabbed my cracked smartphone from the paramedic's tray, pulled up my parents' number, and dialed. It rang 4 agonizing times before my father finally picked up the line. Myra. His voice sounded rushed and intensely irritated. We are literally walking out the front door right now. What is it? Dad, please, I desperately need help. I gasped out, fighting through a wave of severe abdominal pain. I was just in a terrible car accident. I'm in an ambulance being rushed to the trauma bay for emergency surgery right now. Please. I need you and Mom to drive to my apartment and watch the twins for just a few hours until I come out of surgery. There was an absolute, heavy silence on the line for 3 seconds. Then, I heard my father lower the receiver. Muffled, irritated voices echoed through the phone, my mother's sharp, deeply annoyed tone complaining about the delay, followed by Vanessa's light, melodic laugh in the background. My father brought the phone back to his ear. Hold on a second, Myra, he muttered coldly. The line went dead. 2 seconds later, my phone vibrated with a loud notification chime from our family group chat. I tapped the screen with my thumb. The message was from my mother. Myra, you have always been an absolute nuisance and a burden to this family. We have expensive Taylor Swift tickets with Vanessa tonight that we have been planning for months. Figure it out yourself. I stared at the illuminated screen, reading the words once, twice, 3 times, desperately hoping my concussed brain was misinterpreting the letters. But the text remained unchanged. A second notification popped up directly beneath it from my father. You are a medical doctor, Myra. You work in a hospital every day. Stop trying to turn a routine situation into a massive dramatic ordeal. And finally, a third message appeared from Vanessa. It contained no words at all, simply a single, bright yellow laughing crying emoji. That was the absolute sum total of my worth to the Carver family. A laughing emoji sent while I lay bleeding internally in the back of a speeding ambulance. Marcus was standing directly beside my gurney, watching my face. I hadn't realized until that exact second that he could see the bright reflection of the text messages on my phone screen. Myra, his voice was terrifyingly quiet, laced with a dark, professional fury I had never heard from him before. What did your parents just say to you? I couldn't form a verbal sentence. Something fundamental inside my spirit cracked wide open, and it wasn't a wound that any trauma surgeon could sew shut. "I need a phone, Marcus," I whispered, my voice stone cold. "I need a working phone with internet access right now. Mine is about to die." Marcus immediately pulled his private phone from his pocket, unlocked it, and handed it to me without asking a single question. Operating with surgical, clinical precision, I searched for emergency 24-hour private childcare agencies in the city. I located a premier, vetted service, dialed their dispatch line, and explained my situation in crisp, professional sentences. Yes, I required an emergency nanny dispatched to my address within 30 minutes. Yes, I would willingly pay triple the standard holiday hourly rate. Yes, I would provide my current babysitter's contact information for a formal handoff. Yes, I authorized an immediate digital credit card hold for all expenses. The entire logistics problem was solved in under 4 minutes. I handed Marcus his phone back. He stared at me with intense, quiet respect. "Can you take a screenshot of those text messages on my phone and back them up to your secure drive before my battery completely dies, Marcus?" I asked softly. He nodded slowly. "Consider it done, Myra." As the ambulance doors burst open at the hospital trauma bay and the medical team rushed my gurney into the bright lights, I closed my eyes tightly. The physical pain tearing through my abdomen was immense, but as the anesthesiologist placed the mask over my face, a profound, serene sense of absolute peace washed over my soul. From that cold hospital bed, facing my own mortality, I made the single easiest decision of my 34 years on Earth. The emergency laparotomy lasted 4 agonizing hours. The trauma team successfully repaired a severely ruptured spleen and controlled massive internal bleeding. The lead surgeon later admitted that had I arrived 10 minutes later, I would have died on the operating table. I spent 5 long days recovering in the progressive care unit, 5 days of continuous 4 antibiotic drips, a haze of pain medication, and physical therapists helping me take my very first cautious steps down the hallway. During those 5 days, my parents did not call a single time. They sent 0 text messages. They made 0 attempts to visit the hospital. The private nanny agency, while extraordinarily expensive, performed flawlessly, coordinating seamlessly with my regular sitter, ensuring Lily and Lucas were safe, warm, and happy, and sending me high-resolution photo updates every morning and evening. Complete strangers cared infinitely more about the survival of my children than my own biological parents. On my 3rd afternoon in the hospital room, as the morphine fog began to clear, I requested my laptop from the floor nurse. "Dr. Whitmore, are you absolute sure you should be working right now?" she asked gently. "You need to rest." "I am not working," I replied calmly. "I am taking care of personal administrative business." My hands were completely steady as I logged into my online banking portal. The long, rhythmic history of automatic monthly transfers stretched back through 8 years of records like clockwork: $2,400 on the 1st of every month, $800 on the 15th. With 4 deliberate clicks of my mouse, I cancelled every single recurring transfer. I wiped their names off my accounts. Then, I opened my phone settings and systematically blocked my father's mobile number, my mother's number, and Vanessa's number. There were no dramatic tears, no angry confrontation messages, and 0 internal second-guessing. It felt like unbuckling a suffocating, 100-pound iron weight that I had been forced to carry up a mountain for a decade. Marcus stopped by my room later that evening, carrying 2 cups of cafeteria chamomile tea. He pulled up a vinyl chair beside my bed and sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "How are you holding up, Myra?" he asked softly. I looked at him, and for the first time in 8 years, a genuine, unforced smile touched my lips. "For the first time in my entire adult life, Marcus. I actually feel completely fine." He didn't press me for details or offer unsolicited advice, He simply nodded his head slowly, offering me the quiet validation I had craved my entire life. I knew with absolute certainty that an explosive fallout was looming on the horizon. The moment the first day of the upcoming month arrived and those automatic bank deposits failed to clear, my parents would erupt into a frantic storm of narcissistic rage, demands, and dramatic accusations. But I had vastly underestimated how quickly their grand narrative would come crashing down around them. 2 weeks after my life-saving surgery, I was finally back home in my sunlit house, moving cautiously, still sore from the deep abdominal incision, but intensely grateful to be alive with my children. It was a crisp Saturday morning. I was standing at the stove preparing blueberry pancakes for Lily and Lucas, who were happily playing on the kitchen rug. The air smelled of melted butter, sweet syrup, and peaceful security. Suddenly, 3 sharp, heavy knocks echoed against my front door. My heart rate instantly spiked, a familiar cold knot forming in my stomach. If it was my parents coming to confront me, I knew I wasn't emotionally prepared for their screaming match. I carefully walked down the hallway, looked through the small glass peephole, and my breath caught in my throat. Standing on my front porch was an imposing, tall gentleman in his late 70s, his silver hair neatly combed back, wearing a tailored wool overcoat, possessing piercing blue eyes that I recognized instantly from my childhood. He carried the unyielding, formidable posture of a man who had presided over 40 years of high-stakes legal trials from a federal judicial bench. It was my grandfather, Thomas Carver. I hadn't seen or spoken to Grandpa Thomas in nearly 3 full years. My parents had systematically constructed endless excuses for why our family could never visit his estate in upstate Oregon, claiming he was too crotchety, too busy, or that traveling there was far too inconvenient for Vanessa's complex schedule. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the heavy door. Before I could even speak his name, the formidable retired federal judge pulled me into a fierce, protective embrace, holding me so tightly against his chest that I could feel the gentle ache in my healing incision. "Myra, my brave, sweet girl," his voice came out raspy and thick with raw emotion. He pulled back slightly, his sharp blue eyes meticulously scanning my pale face, before dropping to where my hand rested protectively over my bandaged abdomen. "Let me look at you." "Grandpa, what are you doing here?" I stammered, completely bewildered. "How did you?" "I know every single thing that transpired, Myra," he interrupted quietly, his tone laced with a dark, judicial fury. "Your Aunt Eleanor called me the exact night you were rushed into emergency surgery." Aunt Eleanor was my mother's younger sister, the lone, outspoken black sheep of the Carver family, who had openly refused to participate in my parents' toxic dynamic, and had been quietly marginalized as a result. "Grandpa, I don't even know where to begin explaining." He held up a single, commanding hand, cutting off my apology. "You do not owe me, or anyone else in this world, a single word of explanation, Myra. But I require you to come somewhere with me next weekend." He reached inside his breast pocket, pulled out an elegant, cream-colored formal envelope, and handed it to me. It was an official invitation to his upcoming 80th birthday gala, a massive gathering where the entire extended Carver lineage would be assembling. His sharp eyes met mine, glowing with an unbreakable resolve. "It is time for the truth to be spoken in the light, Myra. And I have a few things that need to be officially settled." Grandpa Thomas sat at my wooden kitchen island, watching Lily and Lucas play with their colorful building blocks on the rug. The sharp, intimidating persona of a retired federal judge completely melted away whenever his eyes rested on his great-grandchildren. He smiled warmly as Lucas proudly built a wobbly tower, and Lily promptly knocked it down with a giggle. "They possess your exact spirit, Myra," Grandpa Thomas noted softly, his voice rich with affection. "That same stubborn, beautiful chin you had when you were 3 years old." I set 2 hot mugs of dark coffee on the counter and took the stool across from him, resting my hands against the warm ceramic to stop them from trembling. "Grandpa, how did Aunt Eleanor even find out about the accident that night?" I asked quietly. Grandpa Thomas took a slow sip of his coffee, his eyes turning cold. Eleanor happened to be speaking on the phone with a nurse at your hospital regarding a mutual acquaintance. When she heard that my granddaughter, a top cardiology resident, had been brought into the trauma bay with internal bleeding while her parents were off at a concert, Eleanor immediately called me in tears. I have watched your parents exploit and dismiss you for 20 years, Myra. I am an old man, but I am certainly not blind. He reached across the counter, setting his mug down with a firm click. Tell me something directly, Myra. Do you maintain detailed records of the money you have sent Richard and Helen over the years? I offered a hesitant nod. I have a complete, itemized spreadsheet on my computer, Grandpa. Every single bank transfer, date, and description for 8 years. Good, Grandpa Thomas declared, his voice dropping into the resonant, authoritative register he had used for 40 years on the federal bench. I want you to print out a clean, comprehensive summary of every payment. Every mortgage contribution, every insurance premium, every emergency cash transfer. Because next Saturday, at my 80th birthday celebration, in front of the entire Carver family, the truth is going to be placed on the table. And as I learned over 4 decades of presiding over complex legal cases, objective facts possess a wonderful, devastating way of speaking for themselves. The following 7 days passed in a blur of quiet, intense preparation. I sat at my desk and printed out 8 years of official bank statements, chronologically organizing every single transfer confirmation into a plain manila folder. Seeing the stark numbers compiled on white paper was truly staggering even to me. 96 consecutive monthly mortgage payments of $2,400, 96 consecutive health insurance premiums of $800, plus thousands of dollars for home repairs, car maintenance, and cash gifts for Vanessa's fashion endeavors. The grand total was $364,200. 3 days before the party, Aunt Eleanor came over to my house to check on my surgical recovery. She flipped through the thick manila folder, her eyes widening with profound outrage as she calculated the figures. $364,000, Myra. She gasped out, looking up at me with tears of indignation in her eyes. That is more money than most hard-working people earn in 6 full years of labor. And those ungrateful monsters had the utter audacity to send a text calling you a nuisance and a burden. I don't want to cause a chaotic scene or destroy the family, Aunt Eleanor, I admitted softly, looking at my hands. I just want them to stop lying. I want the family to know I am not the ungrateful, crazy daughter they claim I am. Eleanor placed a firm, reassuring hand on my shoulder. You aren't destroying anything, Myra. You are simply refusing to carry their lies any longer. They built their comfortable, high society lives on your silent labor, and you are under zero moral obligation to keep funding their illusion. That same evening, I received a text message from a distant cousin that confirmed Eleanor's warnings. Hey Myra, just giving you a heads up. Vanessa has been calling everyone in the family claiming you had a complete nervous breakdown after a minor car fender bender, and that you are refusing to speak to your parents out of nowhere. Just thought you should know what they are telling people. They were already systematically laying the groundwork, painting me as mentally unstable to discredit me before I could ever speak. But this time, I wasn't afraid. The afternoon of the 80th birthday gala arrived. Grandpa Thomas's estate was a magnificent, historic colonial mansion situated on 3 acres of pristine land in upstate Oregon, featuring towering white columns and a wide, wraparound porch. As I pulled my car into the circular driveway, my hands were tight on the steering wheel. Over 40 luxury vehicles lined the grounds. The entire Carver lineage had assembled to honor their patriarch. I wore an elegant, tailored navy blue dress that comfortably concealed my abdominal surgical incision, carrying myself with quiet, professional dignity. I held my purse tightly, the thick manila folder resting safely inside. As I walked through the grand double doors with Lily and Lucas, the party was already in full swing inside the ballroom. Waiters circulated with silver trays of champagne, a string quartet played softly near the grand staircase, and crystal chandeliers sparkled above dozens of well-dressed relatives. My eyes instantly landed on my parents near the stone fireplace. My father looked distinguished in a tailored charcoal suit, while my mother wore a cream-colored silk dress, laughing pleasantly with a group of aunts. The exact moment my mother turned her head and saw me standing near the entrance, her laugh abruptly died. My father's expression turned instantly stone-cold. Before either of them could move, my sister, Vanessa, glided across the hardwood floor toward me, wearing a designer evening gown that likely cost more than my monthly student loan payment. Her smile was picture-perfect, but her eyes held pure ice. "Oh, Myra," she purred, leaning in for a fake air kiss against my cheek. "You actually made it. We all heard about your little car accident. Nothing too serious, I hope." I met her gaze with an unblinking, steady intensity. "I suffered a severely ruptured spleen and massive internal bleeding, Vanessa. I underwent emergency surgery and almost died." Her artificial smile flickered for a fraction of a second before she smoothly recovered, patting my arm with false sympathy. "Well, Mom said it was just a minor fender bender, but you look completely fine now, and that's what really matters, isn't it?" She glided away to join a group of cousins, but I could feel the invisible storm gathering in the room. 30 minutes into the event, the first open attack commenced. I was standing near the refreshment table pouring fruit punch for the twins when Vanessa's voice, deliberately elevated so it would carry across the quiet ballroom, cut through the ambient music. "I am honestly just so deeply worried about Myra's mental state," Vanessa declared loudly to a cluster of influential aunts and uncles. "Ever since her little accident, she has been acting so remarkably strange and paranoid, cutting off all communication with Mom and Dad for absolutely no reason at all." My mother immediately stepped into the circle, dabbing her eyes with a delicate lace handkerchief. "We have tried everything to reach her," my mother sobbed softly. "Calls, texts, visits, she simply refuses to speak to us. I fear the pressure of being a single mother has caused some kind of severe psychological breakdown." "Poor thing," an aunt murmured sympathetically, looking over at me with pity. "She was always the overly sensitive, dramatic child," Vanessa added smoothly. "I think she just can't handle real-world stress." I stood perfectly still, my back turned, feeding a strawberry to Lucas, refusing to give them the reaction they so desperately craved. Aunt Eleanor appeared at my side, her voice trembling with quiet rage. "They have been circulating through the room since the party started, Myra, telling everyone that you are unstable so no one will believe you when you speak." "Let them talk, Eleanor," I said softly, looking across the room at my grandfather. Grandpa Thomas was standing near the head of the room, holding a glass of whiskey, watching the entire scene with an unreadable, intense expression. He caught my eye across the crowded room and offered the smallest, most definitive nod. It was time. Someone gently tapped a silver spoon against a crystal glass, and the room gradually fell into silence. Grandpa Thomas walked slowly to the center of the spacious room, standing beside the grand piano. Even at 80 years old, he commanded the room with the absolute, unquestioned authority of a man who had presided over thousands of federal cases. Before we proceed with the evening's dinner and toasts, Grandpa Thomas announced, his deep voice effortlessly carrying into every corner of the ballroom, "I have a few critical matters that I intend to address with the family." The atmosphere in the room instantly shifted, becoming thick with tension. Before my grandfather could continue, my father stepped forward out of the crowd, smoothing his jacket, offering a tight, controlled smile. "Dad, please, before you begin your speech, there is an uncomfortable family matter that Helen and I feel the family should be made aware of regarding Myra." My father turned to face the 40 assembled relatives, adopting his most sympathetic, long-suffering parental persona. "As many of you may have heard through rumors, our youngest daughter, Myra, has been going through an extraordinarily difficult emotional period lately. Following a recent vehicle incident, she has become profoundly confused, distant, and hostile. She has cut off all communication with her loving mother and me, and she has been spreading deeply hurtful lies throughout the community, claiming that we abandoned her during a medical emergency, and that we do not care for her. My mother stepped directly to his side, clutching her handkerchief. We have only ever offered that girl our complete, unconditional love and support, she wept softly, ensuring every relative could hear her sorrow. To have her turn around and accuse us of neglecting her when she was in the hospital is simply heartbreaking to a mother's heart. Vanessa chimed in from the side, her tone dripping with dramatic concern. She has even been claiming that Mom and Dad refused to help watch her children while she was sick, which is an absolute, complete fabrication. There has obviously been some tragic mental breakdown on her part. Sympathetic murmurs rippled through the gathered relatives. A distant aunt looked over at me, shaking her head in disapproval. My father looked around the room, thoroughly satisfied with his performance. We simply ask that everyone show Myra patience during this tragic emotional collapse. We gave that girl everything, absolutely everything a child could ever ask for. Are you quite finished with your speech, Richard? Grandpa Thomas's voice cut through the room like an icy steel blade. The question was delivered with a quiet, terrifying calm, but every single person in that ballroom heard the immense weight behind it. My father's confident expression faltered slightly. Dad. I just felt the family deserved to know the truth about her behavior. The family certainly deserves to know the absolute truth, Richard, Grandpa Thomas interrupted, stepping directly into the center of the room. And I intend to provide it to them right now. The entire room went dead silent. The string quartet stopped playing entirely. Grandpa Thomas looked at my father, then at my mother, his piercing blue eyes completely unblinking. I have listened patiently to your concerning story, Richard. You and Helen have painted a very vivid, tragic picture of an unstable, ungrateful daughter, who has turned against her selfless, loving parents. So now, as a former federal judge who spent 40 years evaluating evidence, I would like to ask you a few very simple, foundational questions. My father shifted his feet uncomfortably. Dad, this is a private family birthday party, not a courtroom. This is precisely the place. Grandpa Thomas's voice boomed out, echoing off the high ceilings with undeniable authority. This is our family, and this family is going to hear the unvarnished facts. Richard, a simple question. Who has been paying the monthly mortgage on your house for the past 8 years? My father's face instantly drained of all color. What? Our mortgage? That is a private matter. Who has been paying the $2,400 monthly mortgage on your home for 96 consecutive months, Richard? Grandpa Thomas demanded firmly. My father's eyes darted frantically toward my mother. Helen and I pay our own mortgage, of course. Do you really? Grandpa Thomas reached into his inner suit pocket, pulled out the thick manila folder I had given him, and opened it. Because I hold in my hands an official, certified bank audit detailing 96 consecutive monthly wire transfers originating directly from Myra's personal salary account straight to your mortgage lender, totaling $232,000. A loud, collective gasp echoed through the ballroom. Relatives looked at one another in utter shock. My mother stammered frantically, that was simply a voluntary family gift. Myra offered to help us. We never forced her. I am not suggesting you pointed a weapon at her head, Helen, Grandpa Thomas replied with chilling calm. I am simply establishing baseline facts. He flipped to the next page of the audit. Let us review a few more numbers for the family's enlightenment. Health insurance premiums for Richard and Helen, $800 a month for 8 years, totaling $76,000. Emergency cash transfers for vehicle repairs, roof replacements, and home renovations, $45,000. Cash gifts to fund Vanessa's fashion endeavors, $12,000. The grand total that your unstable, burden of a daughter has quietly transferred to you over 8 years is $364,200. The silence in the grand ballroom was staggering and absolute. You could hear the faint rustle of the velvet curtains in the wind. Aunt Eleanor stepped forward out of the crowd, her voice ringing out clearly. For context, everyone, $364,000 is more money than a full-time paramedic or teacher earns in 7 years of hard labor. Myra provided that entire fortune while working 80-hour medical residency shifts and raising 3-year-old twins completely alone. We never realized it was that much. My mother sobbed, her composure completely disintegrating into genuine, ugly panic. She never complained. She never complained, Grandpa Thomas repeated, his voice laced with profound sorrow and anger, because you systematically raised her to believe that her own feelings and needs were completely worthless in this family. But let us address the final, most horrifying fact of all. Grandpa Thomas pulled his reading glasses from his pocket, opened a secondary sheet of paper from the folder, and looked directly at my mother. 2 weeks ago, Myra was involved in a life-threatening broadside collision. She was bleeding internally in an ambulance, being rushed into emergency trauma surgery. She called her parents from that ambulance, terrified, begging you to watch her 3-year-old children for a few hours while doctors saved her life. This is the exact, unedited text message she received in response from her mother, Helen Carver. Grandpa Thomas cleared his throat and read the text message aloud to 40 of our closest relatives. Myra, you have always been an absolute nuisance and a burden to this family. We have expensive Taylor Swift tickets with Vanessa tonight that we have been planning for months. Figure it out yourself. A wave of pure, visceral horror swept through the room. An aunt in the front row covered her mouth, letting out an audible gasp of disgust. Oh my God. Helen, how could you? My father's brother, Uncle Frank, stepped backward away from my parents, staring at them with utter revulsion. You left your daughter to potentially die in a hospital so you could go to a pop concert. Uncle Frank shouted, his voice shaking with anger. And then you stood in this room today and called her crazy. We didn't know it was that serious. My father yelled back desperately, his face flushed a violent red as his public image crumbled into dust. We thought she was exaggerating as usual. Did you call her back to check? Grandpa Thomas's voice cut through his lies like a thunderclap. Did you drive to the hospital? Did you check on those innocent toddlers? The answer, Richard, is no, no, and no. A complete stranger, a private nanny service paid for by Myra from her hospital bed, cared for those children while you sat in a concert arena. My mother collapsed onto a sofa, weeping hysterically, no longer using her delicate handkerchief, realizing that her reputation in the family was permanently destroyed. Vanessa stood frozen near the piano, her face pale, unable to meet the disgusted stares of her cousins. Grandpa Thomas closed the folder, turned toward me, his piercing blue eyes softening with immense warmth and pride. Myra, my sweet girl, is there anything you would like to say to your family? I stood in the center of the room holding Lily in my arms while Lucas held tightly to my dress. I hadn't planned on speaking. I had assumed I would simply stand in the background while the financial evidence spoke for itself. But looking at my parents' ruined, exposed faces, and looking at the relatives who were now staring at me with deep sympathy and respect, I felt an incredible, quiet strength surge through my veins. I stepped forward, my voice remarkably steady and clear. I didn't come to this party to seek revenge, I said, my words echoing softly in the quiet room. I came because my grandfather invited me, and because I was tired of living in a family where the truth was constantly inverted. For 34 years, I allowed myself to believe that if I just gave enough money, worked hard enough, and sacrificed my own needs completely, my parents would finally love me the way they loved Vanessa. But lying in that ambulance 2 weeks ago, bleeding and terrified, I finally understood the truth. My value to you was never as a daughter. My value to you was simply as a convenient, unlimited source of money. I looked directly into my father's eyes, refusing to let him look away. I have officially cancelled every single automatic bank transfer. I have removed your names from my accounts, and I have blocked your numbers. I am not doing this out of malice or bitterness. I am doing this because I am a mother now, and I refuse to let my children grow up watching their mother be exploited and abused by the people who were supposed to protect her. The financial support is over permanently. If you ever wish to have a relationship with me or your grandchildren in the future, it will begin with total accountability, genuine repentance, and complete respect. But until that day comes, I am officially choosing myself and my children. An absolute, respectful silence fell over the room. Uncle Frank walked over, gently placed his hand on my shoulder, and whispered, "I am so deeply sorry for how you were treated, Myra. You are a remarkable woman." Several other aunts and cousins stepped forward, gathering around me, offering genuine hugs, apologies, and expressions of support. My father stood alone near the fireplace, utterly ruined, unable to offer a single word of defense, while my mother sobbed helplessly on the couch. The fallout from that afternoon was swift and absolute. My parents left the birthday gala early in total disgrace, unable to face the family. In the weeks that followed, the relatives quietly excluded them from family gatherings, Sunday dinners, and holiday events. Deprived of my $3,200 monthly financial subsidy, my parents were completely unable to maintain their expensive lifestyle. Within 3 months, they were forced to put their large suburban home on the market, sell their luxury vehicles, and move into a small rental property, facing the harsh reality of their own financial mismanagement. Vanessa lost several key fashion consulting contracts after news of her behavior circulated through the regional community, forcing her to take a part-time retail job to support herself. Meanwhile, my life transformed into a haven of peace, joy, and true security. The $3,200 I previously funneled to my parents every month was redirected into a secure educational trust fund for Lily and Lucas, ensuring my children would never have to worry about their future. Grandpa Thomas became a constant, loving presence in our daily lives, visiting every weekend to take the twins to the park and play in the garden. Aunt Eleanor became one of my closest confidants, frequently joining us for peaceful family dinners. Surrounded by people who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide, I finally healed from the wounds of my past. I learned the most vital lesson of my life: true family is never defined by shared genetics or forced obligation, but by unconditional love, mutual respect, and the courage to set boundaries that protect your peace.